Hey everyone! In today's video we're going to be learning about fermentation chambers, and I'm going to show you how to make your very own. To understand what you need to make a good fermentation container, you need to understand a little bit about what fermentation actually is and what's happening during that process. I'm going to be talking mainly about lacto fermentation today. Lacto fermentation is the process where you use naturally occurring bacteria that is in the wild. It is on most vegetables and fruits and things like that. And we're using that to process our food to make it so that it lasts longer. And also a byproduct of that is it tastes really good as well. People have been fermenting food for a long time, and they didn't have any fancy gadgets to do it. In the past, what they'd do is just have an open fermentation. And that's perfectly fine. When you are doing an open fermentation, you need to make sure that your vegetables are kept below the brine surface. So what is brine? Brine is just salt and water. You don't want too much salt, but you also don't want too little salt. And what happens is the bad bacteria that's out there can't actually exist inside a brine solution. So if you keep your vegetables below the surface of the brine, then you should be keeping it fairly safe. Two things happen when you ferment food. Number one is the lactobacillus will create lactic acid, and that increases the acidity of the food that you're fermenting. And that's what helps it keep safe. If your food is more acidic, then it allows that food to last a lot longer. And that's why we use vinegar, because it helps to keep the food in a nice safe environment that keeps away any of the bad bacteria. So that's number one, that's lactic acid. It helps increase acidity by decreasing the pH level of your vegetables, or peppers in our case. And number two, it creates carbon dioxide. Now that's something else that we use to help us keep our fermentations nice and safe. Let's have a look at a couple fermentation pots that exist out there, some commercial ones and ones that have been around for years and years. The first one I'll show you is down here. This one here is what we call a fermentation croc. Now these have been around for a long time, and basically all it is a crock pot, and it has this channel inside here which you fill with water. And the lid, if you have a look there, has little holes. When you put this over, the water creates a seal. And what happens there is it allows the CO2 to escape. Like I said, the fermentation creates CO2, so it actually emits gas. And if you don't allow it to escape, then you're going to have a bit of a problem on your hands. So the CO2 escapes and displaces any of the oxygen in there as well, which I'll come back to in a little bit. It allows the CO2 and any other air to bubble out from here. And it doesn't allow any dirty air back inside the pot. So these are fantastic. One other thing it has, if you have a look inside, these are stone weights. So these here, there's two of them. And you use that to weigh down your food, and it keeps it below the brine level as well. Now, I use this mainly for fermenting cabbage, so making sauerkraut. You can use it to make kimchi and things like that as well. I guess you could use it to ferment your peppers if you have quite a lot. I mean, this is quite a big pot, this. So you can use it for peppers, really is up to you. So this is fantastic. The downside is this is not cheap. This here is about 40-50 pounds. You might be able to get them cheaper. In the UK, we have to normally order them out from Germany. There's a company out there that make them. The other problem is sometimes you can get hold of older ones. Now you got to be careful there, because back when they were making these, maybe 40, 50 years ago, they weren't too concerned about things like lead. And unfortunately, the paint that they use in a lot of the older ones contains lead. And you don't want to be fermenting or storing any food inside anything that has lead in it. So that's a fermentation crock. It's a really lovely device. I'm just going to put that aside. Another commercial one, which I actually like quite a bit, is this here from Lakeland. So we have a bit of a closer look. So all that it is, it's a sealed device. You can see there's a nice ring around there. And what happens is this allows air to escape. It's a good option as well. And again, it is a little bit pricey. I'm not sure of the exact cost, but I'll put it up over here. So what do I use? Well, there are two ways that you can do this. That I prefer one method which costs a little bit more, but still a lot cheaper than the other solutions I showed you. But the very cheapest solution is this. Basically, all you need is a jar, which you can have an old sauce jar, or you can buy them if you want, but I'm sure you have some glass jars lying around. You're going to need a Ziploc bag or some piece of plastic that you know won't let air or liquid in or out. And you're going to need an elastic band. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your jar, you're going to fill it up with your fermenting mixture, whether that's peppers with brine or a pepper mash. You're going to put that into the jar. You then take your Ziploc bag, stick it over the top. You take an elastic band and stick it on the jar. You don't want this too tight, but you want it tight enough. When the fermentation starts creating the CO2, well, this will build up pressure. You'll see this will expand. It's quite a good way to actually see that it's working, actually. But you'll see that this will expand and it will allow the air, when it's too much pressure, it'll allow the air to come out underneath the elastic band. So that's a nice, easy, cheap way of doing it. So feel free to use that way. So the way I tend to do it is the second way, which I'm going to show you now. Nice and easy to do, and it's something that you can reuse over and over, so you don't have to keep using Ziploc bags and elastics and throwing them away. So what I use are these plastic containers. These are Sunpet branded. Doesn't have to be Sunpet, but I really like these. They are really good quality plastic. They are BPA free. They are food safe containers. You don't want to use a plastic that isn't food safe because it could leach toxins into your food, and you really don't want that. But this here is food safe, and like I say, the plastic is really good quality. So I've got a few different sizes here because obviously I don't always do a small fermentation or a big fermentation. It's nice to have a few options. So here you can see a few different sizes. So all that we need to do is allow this to have a way of releasing the CO2 and also protecting it from any bad bacteria or any dirty air or any particles from getting back in. What we do there is we are going to create an airlock. So let's get started. I'm going to do it in this bigger container. What we do is we take the lid off. You're going to need a block of wood. You don't want to be drilling into your countertop, so make sure you have a scrap piece of wood, or do this outside, or just make sure you're not going to damage your counter. You're going to need a drill. I'm using a drill bit to make a bit of a pilot hole, and then to make the actual hole I'll be using this. For reference, the hole size is 12.5 millimeters, but with this thing here that I'm using, this just goes up to 12. But that's perfectly fine, and you'll see how that will work in a second. You want to lay it down that way, because if you do it this side, you could put pressure on this and break the lid itself. So have it down that way, and it'll make it a lot easier. Try and get the hole in the center, just to make it look a bit neater. There we go. I just wanted a bit of a pilot hole. Because this here will just work a lot easier going in. And now what we do is just put that inside the hole and get this up as high a speed as you can. You don't want to do this slowly because you'll just make a mess. So get this into the hole. You can see that it's through there. And you want to make sure you keep checking where you're at with this. We can see that I'm up to 10 millimeters, so I need to go up one more ring. Now once you've done that, once you've got through to the 12 millimeter, Don't push anymore when you're drilling, but keep drilling just to smooth out the edges. There we go. We have a perfectly formed hole. Be careful as well, all these little plastic bits, make sure you clean them off before you do any cooking or fermenting or anything, because you don't want this going into your food. Just make sure there's no burrs on this, so if there's any like raised edges here, just try and get rid of them. It's not terrible if it's there, but just clean them off. And we have our hole. The next thing you're going to need are grommets, and these are going to go in to help seal this for when we use the airlock. So these are two different types I have. Just make sure the grommet has a hole that's about 9.5 millimeters on the inside, because that will help you when you fit in your airlock. So all that you need to do to get it in here, I'm going to use this one here. You just need to force it in. So just squeeze it in, start it off. You see there's a bit of a ridge on the inside. So you can see that. So I'll try and do it close up here. It takes a bit of force, but you want to stick that in so the edge starts, and then you want to start forcing it in like this. And there you go. It's pretty straightforward, really. And just make sure that it's properly out on that side. And now you have a nice tight seal here. So when you put your airlock in, you're going to create a really good seal. So this here, it just slots in to there. We have that inside there. We have the jar. We put that on and you have a perfect fermentation jar. These are typically what I use. I just want to point out, this isn't entirely airtight. Now, you might think that defeats the point a little bit. It's not really too much of a problem. The seal is good enough. So once it's tightened up, it actually holds the air quite well. But it's not going to be a perfect seal because, like I said, it doesn't have that rubber ring on the inside to actually help it. But still, with these, the whole thing with the jar, the lid, the grommet, and the airlock itself, this whole thing is reusable, and depending on where you buy it, it'll cost you around about £4 or so. If you do want a more airtight cap on your container, which I understand if you are doing a much longer fermentation, if you are doing a fermentation that takes like a year or so, then there is an option for you. Works out a little bit more expensive than the Sun Pet jars, but I do use this as well, depending on what type of fermentation I'm doing. And what that is you take a Kilner jar. So these are just a preserving jar that has standard cap. And you can use these things. These are SteriCap caps, and they're far more airtight. So when you put them on the jar here, you get a far better seal than you do with the plastic jars. So that is an option. These cost, I think I paid about £8 for 6 of these. And you can do the same thing as I did with this one here, which is just drill a hole in the middle and fit a grommet. You have a few choices there. Choose the one that's best for your budget and for the type of fermentation that you're doing. Let me know in the comments below if you are making your own fermentation pots. I'm always looking for new ideas, so happy to learn. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next video. Bye-bye for now.